but it is difficult making that transition from drawing from life and drawing realistic proportions and representational art, and then transitioning to concept art, especially to stylized cartoons, where you're varying up the proportions, simplifying the planes, and exaggerating, caricaturing everything.
All right, so welcome everyone to this Force interview. Today we're going to be talking to Josh Hunter Black. So welcome, Josh. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been an admirer of your work now for some time. Obviously, I've been watching you on Instagram, and I think what first brought attention to me was of course, it felt like your drawings had a lot of force in it. You have really great, decisive line that you're using to create form and bringing into shape. To me, you're running on all pistons, and that's getting you to these like really amazing drafting skills. So again, thank you very much for coming today.
Well,
So,
thank you. It's a pleasure.
yeah. And I noticed, of course, what I loved is I noticed that you even called out some of the Force books. I know you've looked at my books. You've got Michael Hampton on there and George Bridgman and a bunch of other guys. So it seems like you're always learning and, going through all of these art of books. So it seems like you're constantly trying to grow, and it seems like you draw a lot. Like, how much time are you putting into your work outside of your actual full-time job?
Oh, well, with my full-time job, I'm, drawing 8 to 10 hours a day. And then on top of that, I try to draw just with studies and personal work, like 2 hours.
So another 2
1 or 2
hours a
hours.
day.
Yeah. So I guess I draw quite a bit.
Is that scheduled time? Do you know, like, oh, every night I'm going to draw from 8 to 10 o'clock or 9 to 11 or something like that?
I used to have more of a routine.
Mm-hmm.
Lately, with all this craziness with the pandemic and all that,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's in the morning, sometimes it's at night or during lunch hour, just whenever I can squeeze it in, really.
And before we go into the whole, into in depth into the interview, just really quick, like, what are you working with at work and at home? What kind of supplies you're using?
Photoshop. I
Photoshop.
use Photoshop. I have a 24 HD Cintiq that I draw on that I love. It feels a lot more like traditional sketching. I had a tablet for a long time, and I like that too. But the Cintiq is really nice for sketching and kind of loose painting.
Cool.
So
So I thought what we would share with you guys, the audience, is to get to know a little bit of Josh's background, and that'll lead us up into to current day and what you're doing right now and where you're working and so on. And then we're going to get to watch you draw a little bit, which I think will be super exciting. So I like always finding out very briefly, what was like childhood like. Are you someone who's been drawing since you were, since you were a kid, or did you start in like high school? And what did that all look like?
I've been drawing since I was a little kid.
Hmm.
Um, I have a twin brother,
Interesting.
and I actually work with him. We both work for Avalanche
Uh huh.
Studios in Salt Lake, and um, we just love hanging out together, drawing, sculpting, just creating anything really.
That's cool. So you have like a
And
lifetime artistic partner,
yeah,
right? It's pretty awesome.
yeah, partner in crime.
Yeah, it's really cool. So the both of you, I guess, through your childhood and growing up, have always been tag teaming art, basically.
Yeah, it's pretty nice because we always look at each other's work and give each other feedback, and um, we can give each other that motivation.
Were there any were there any key inspirations in your childhood that drove you to want to do art? And then my second question there would be, and then the really big decision is when you're in high school to pick, colleges and make a decision of saying, yeah, I'm going to go to school towards some kind of, art career versus something else, So was there some kind of childhood thing that was driving you guys? And then what made you make the decision to go to, let's say, an art school?
Well, growing up, we had a cousin that was an amazing draftsman, Wayne, and he loved to sit with Jake and I when we were little kids
Mm.
and draw with us and teach us how to draw. And uh, he's kind of this crazy genius level artist who has a photographic memory, and he could literally sit down and just draw like Star Wars characters without any reference, and they'd look just like them, and it would
Huh.
just blow our minds away.
All right.
I think we just admired him so much and wanted to be more like it. So he kind of mentored us when we were little kids and got
Yeah.
us
Cool.
really into it. So I think he played a big role.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. God, to have somebody in the family that is just an amazing artist must have been really inspiring.
Yeah, it's funny because now he's a nuclear physicist. he, does, he
That's
doesn't
funny.
draw or paint or do anything like that anymore, but
That's interesting.
he had a lot of talent.
Yeah, that's a shame. I'd love to see him do more artwork.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Him and his brother, Boyd, they're both that way. Yeah, it's unbelievable just the raw talent that they had. But
Yeah, we a few weeks ago, myself and the other forest drawing instructors, we did a video showing drawings from our childhood and where we are today. And that was basically the big question, like, is there talent, or what does talent mean? How much talent did you have or not? How much did you like learn or not? And I think we kind of summed up at probably there's a mixture of the two. You probably have some kind of genetic coding going on of, hey, I'm interested, I'm curious in looking at the world in the first place, or I like watching cartoons or comics, and there's motivation behind that, and maybe your brain is one that allows you to see some level of reality or truth, and it's interesting enough to you. But then there's a lot of practice, right, to get skilled.
I was just gonna say, I think a big part of it too is just um, having people close to you that are supportive with your drawing and creative endeavors.
Yeah.
That they're okay that you want to be an artist and that you want to draw, and
Yeah.
they encourage that and keep buying you more paper and reams of
Right.
paper. So
Yeah, they're kind
that's
of
how
like,
my parents were, and I know that made a big difference.
yeah, you got like angel investors.
Yeah,
Right, they're sponsoring you.
yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of uh, kids out there that love to draw and could be really good artists, and maybe unfortunately their parents don't think that's a viable way of making a living, and so
Yeah.
they don't encourage that, and which is a shame.
Yeah, it's usually fear driven, right? It's like, and you have a child, right? And I have two daughters myself who are, one is actually 17, the other one's 20. And
Oh wow.
yeah, and you have to it's having the courage to let your kids do what they want to do, versus I need you to just be safe and get a job, and that,
Hmm.
I think a lot of the time it's on the parents' shoulders, right? Like they focus the child towards a space of, I want you to make me feel safe. um,
Right.
and
Kind of
instead
the
of,
whole Finding
yeah,
Nemo story.
yeah, exactly, exactly. That's right. Instead of you being happy, yeah. So again, you had all of the right things in place, I guess, to help you get to a position where you're doing art for a living. So in school, high school, you decided to go towards an art school, right?
Yeah, I took a number of art classes in high school and even did AP art. And during that time, I was actually really into ceramics
Mm-hmm.
and specifically pottery.
Mm-hmm.
We had a great teacher, Andy Watson, just became a really good friend of mine, and uh, just super talented and very much inspired me. And so initially, I thought that was kind of the direction I wanted to go in,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up getting a scholarship at BYU
Mm-hmm.
in their ceramics program, and yeah, that's how I got my foot in the door at BYU. And it wasn't my grades, it's
Right.
definitely my art.
Right. Why ceramics and pottery? Like you were drawing and you had your cousin and he's drawing like Star Wars characters, and now you're doing pottery.
I took my first ceramics class. I think I was a sophomore in high school,
Mm.
and just that first experience of like sitting down with the clay on the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
um, I just kind of fell in love with it, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Just that kind of tactile experience of
Yeah.
feeling the clay in your hands. And there's something magical about watching it form into this vessel
Yeah. It's cool.
that was just very enjoyable.
So these are all your pieces? Yeah, this one on the right is amazing. Like the intricacy of all this and the different surfaces you created.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. They're all beautiful, but man, this on the right, man, just kind of blows my mind. Yeah, it's really cool. So you were at BYU, and all of a sudden there was this big change, right? You left pottery and ceramics for a different department, right? So what was that and why?
I think there were two big factors. Actually, I should say three. One, my brother was in the animation program, and he worked really, really hard to get into that program. And uh, to get into that program, you have to do a lot of figure drawing. And so just to hang out with my brother, I'd go to his figure drawing classes with him, and I decided to start participating and in those classes. And kind of similar to ceramics, when I sat down at the wheel, when I sat down and started figure drawing, I just kind of fell in love with it. And like that aspect of drawing, I was really, really interested in it, and uh, really wanted to get better, and kind of had that passion right away.
Did you find, was there any connection between the two? So you already talked about one, which is sort of like loving the experience, right? Was there anything from a skills standpoint or something you started recognizing like, oh, this actually carries over?
From ceramics
Yeah, to drawing.
to drawing, I mean, I guess thinking in 3D space,
Uh-huh. Like the
probably,
volume, right?
yeah, the volumes and how all those shapes interact with each other.
Right. Yeah, because what's interesting, I'm glad you said that because, your ceramics are very also decisive and perfected, and so is your drawing. Like you have, again, one of the things that really drew me to your Instagram account was your decisiveness, the clarity of the decisions, and the ceramics have that in there as well. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I would never think about somebody who's, for instance, like a character designer, done ceramics before, but I can imagine that there's connection, that's happening between that.
Yeah, I was just thinking it's kind of funny, but with ceramics, when you're throwing on the wheel, like you get really obsessive about the pot not wobbling or being asymmetrical, and
Right.
so you're constantly like getting out of your chair, taking you know a few steps or several steps back to really see the shape as a whole and see if
Mm.
it's working or not. And I guess that carries over to drawing too. Like when you're flipping your canvas or you're stepping back from your canvas or your piece to kind of see if everything structurally and compositionally is working. Um,
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I still not often, but every so often, I'll flip a drawing and be like, "Whoa!" Like I just warped out like the form on this, right?
Yeah, that happens to me a lot still.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird how your brain is heavy on one side, and therefore you perceive things to look right. It's almost like each eyeball is different or something, and it represents each side of your brain. And you look from one side, it looks fine, and you flip it, and it's entirely skewed, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
It's very
I feel
strange.
like I favor the right side.
Yeah, me too. Most definitely. I favor the right. You know, even when I'm
Yeah,
drawing, I find there's certain angles of characters or whatever that'll be more difficult than others to get because I'm used to like it's almost like you're perceiving the world more heavily through one eye than the other. It's just kind of weird.
yeah.
So you were at BYU and you started learning figure drawing. I think you told me earlier this is where you happen to bump into the Force books, right? Because I know that they use the Force stuff at BYU. I've met quite a few BYU students at like CTNX who were like, "Hey, we know about your stuff," you know. So is that where that happened for you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The Force books. I think it was both in the animation program and illustration.
Oh, that's cool.
Um, it's kind of one of the staples, and especially for me, like I loved having those books because I studied Loomis and
Hmm. Hmm.
Bridgman and those
Hmm.
guys, which are fantastic resources too. But
Yep.
they they do feel a bit rigid,
Right.
and that's why I was kind of drawn to your books. Is I loved how like fluid they were. They're really capturing those rhythms and the weight,
Hmm.
and uh, and that's definitely something I wanted more of in my work.
Hmm. Well, you've definitely done that. That's for sure. Yeah, it's
Oh,
really
thank
cool.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up obviously on the bridge. I think my first art book was How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Um, and then in college later on, somebody actually gifted me with one of the original copies of the Bridgman books while I was in school. And then I think I got my hands on the Loomis book as well. And it's almost like every book has a couple of things you could really pull out of it, you know, that are valuable, that stick with you, you know. And then the rest of it's like, oh, like I love the Bridgman books, but to me they're kind of hard to get through the content. It's the reading of it. It's more like I love the drawings, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I just love the drama of the drawings. Otherwise, I'm like, oh my God, he's using Roman numerals and there's all these like
It,
little weird diagrams in here. Like, I don't know what's going on.
yeah, and it's like in Latin
Yeah,
instead
exactly.
of kind of the more modern medical terms for
Yeah.
everything. And
Oh, yeah.
like, oh, I don't want to memorize these Latin terms and the modern terms now.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So it gets, yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So you get to BYU and so how many did you do full 4 years in the animation program?
No, I actually I was in the animation program for a year and a half,
Hmm.
and then I switched over to the illustration program.
Hmm. Okay.
'Cause I decided I wanted to focus more on 2D art, drawing and painting, and color, and that just felt right for me at the time. I still did a number of animation classes, so it was more of a hybrid of the two departments, which I really enjoyed because there was great professors on both sides. So
Right. Yeah, so in a way you tailored your own curriculum in a sense, right? And you crossed over two departments. It's funny because I did the same thing when I was in school. I wasn't in animation, I was in cartooning, which was really comics. So I was actually, and I stayed in that major, but I took a ton of classes in the illustration department. And I took a little bit of animation as well. So kind of similar story, and it wasn't just sticking in the one department. I was really looking for who the best teachers are across the different departments, you know, while I was there.
yeah, I think when you're personally motivated and you have that passion, you just kind of carve out your own path.
Yeah, it's probably the best way to use school, you know.
Yeah, I think so.
So you get out of school, and I don't know if this happened immediately or not, but we know that you got to Avalanche. So maybe to fill in the gap a little bit between the two, and how did you get from school to Avalanche? Because I think you said earlier today you've been at Avalanche for quite some time now, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's been, oh geez, maybe it's been even 10 years.
Yeah, it's a long
It's
time for nowadays to be
yeah,
with company.
it's been it's been a while. It's crazy. It feels like the people I work with are like family
Yeah,
now.
yeah, it's
Because
cool. So I was kind of blown away, honestly, that you worked on these Disney Infinity toys. It's like probably I think one of my favorite toys in like the last 20 years that have come out. You know, the level of design that they have, the sort of level of abstraction of cartooniness from reality, um, very clear shape design, great forms, you know, lots of force and fluidity flowing through them. And that's a really tricky space, you know, to get to where like force, form, and shape are working to create a product. Um, so how has that been for you, you know? And I think what probably the audience and myself would like to know is, how did your experiences at BYU and drawing, translate over here? What did translate over? What didn't translate over? Were there difficulties in, going from these drawing and painting classes in school to, okay, now I'm at my job. How does that work?
Um, I, I'd say the hardest thing, when you're at school, especially if you are like me and I had just decided I wanted to do concept art, and I didn't quite know what that meant
Hmm.
when I made that decision initially, because I was wanting to do ceramics, and um, but I did know I loved drawing and I love figure drawing, and I felt like that was something I was doing well in. Um, but it is difficult making that transition from drawing from life and drawing realistic proportions and representational art, and then transitioning to concept art, especially to stylized cartoons, where you're varying up the proportions, simplifying the planes, and exaggerating, you know, caricaturing everything.
Right.
And that's, I mean, that's a whole new like skill in and of itself. And that took me a while to get become more comfortable with. I mean, I still feel like I got a long ways to go, but I think if I were to do it over again, like my schooling, to make it more applicable to that, I'd spend probably half my time drawing from life and then half my time drawing out of my head.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember I had the same challenge. I learned so much from drawing through observation and understanding what I was looking at, that drawing from my head was much more difficult, and it took some time to, I guess, free myself from reality and try to create some systems in place that would help me, get into my headspace. I think shape actually really drove that for me a lot. I think once I started grabbing onto shapes and then discovering like forceful shape, that kind of exploded my ability to draw from my imagination because I could simplify things down, and made it a lot faster.
Yeah, and that's like you're saying, like being able to kind of simplify things
Hmm.
is a really big deal, because those animators and illustrators, it's sometimes it's not seeing more, but it's being able to simplify what they are looking at.
Yeah, that's sometimes the hardest part, right? Is just getting more abstract, getting to, like you said, simple planes and stuff. So this is all work that you did for Avalanche, of course, towards the Infinity Toys. It's cool. You got to obviously cross over into Star Wars, which is pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, no, I freaked out when I learned we were going to work on Star Wars properties.
Yeah. And then you've got Marvel in here as well.
Hmm.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, those were fun years
Yeah.
working on those projects.
Yeah.
And especially with the team of guys I was working with. I mean, we just had so many really talented artists.
Yeah. How many concept artists were there designing the actual figures?
So we had, let's see, uh, John Diesta. He was kind of the lead character designer,
Hmm.
um, over the Disney Infinity toys, um, and he played a huge role in developing the look and style, and just a phenomenal guy and artist. And then we have Ben Simonson and Sebastian Gallego, Matthew Armstrong, Jason Kim, Nason Hardcastle. I'm trying to think of all the artists.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it was just a big team effort
Hmm.
working on all these toys.
Hmm.
Like, I think all of us touched probably every one of these guys uh, two or three times.
So that's interesting. It's not like you took one character and you owned that guy and took him from beginning to end, even in the concept phase. Other concept artists can touch your concept art,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and that requires um, that. I think that's hard for a lot of artists,
Right.
especially initially.
Right. Right.
because you want to feel like, oh, this is my idea, this is my art, it's special. No one else can touch it and desecrate it.
Right.
But I mean, that's really what the animation industry is all about, is working collaboratively as a team and creating a unified vision together as a team. And that requires a lot of iteration and a lot of going back and forth between each other.
Yeah.
And you have to have thick skin that way.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I always looked at it as like, I think for me, the learning curve was product comes first, not me, right? And not you. Like we're here together for this other vision, this bigger thing than all of us, you know? So we're going to just keep working together to make this thing as awesome as possible, you know?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's a good way to see it. Otherwise, yeah, your ego will be destroyed.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You'll hate your job and you'll hate the work and so on. So I asked you to bring these in because you happened to mention to me that you did environment work too. So these are beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's great to see that, so you're not only a drawer, and that's not even a not only because that's already hard enough in itself, but to actually take the drawing skills that you've learned and take them to the space of environment and painting them, right? So I would imagine this is where your illustration work that you were talking about in school started to really come in handy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, taking figurative painting classes,
Mhm.
I think, really helped with kind of breaking into color theory and understanding relationships between like light, warm and cool colors, and understanding value and composition. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, every aspect of it's like
Yeah.
a new set of problems, a new ball game.
I notice here one image is obviously super loose and rough, and the other one is much tighter. Do you have a preference to what space you like to work in?
Personally, I love like looser
Mhm.
brushstrokes. I mean, I love painters like Richard Schmidt.
Right.
I mean, so does every painter.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, I think like work that almost shows this alla prima vibe to it,
Right.
where everything's very gestural and it kind of captures the moment and it just kind of breathes some life into the image and feels less photographic. Again, like I feel like I'm have a long ways to go to get to where I want to be with painting.
Yeah, it feels like a really long endeavor, longer to me than drawing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There's just so many aspects of it that
Hmm.
you have to master.
So here, these are fun. You've got some of your own personal work. I guess you're a TWD fan.
Yeah, yeah. I was definitely into the series for a few years,
Hmm.
so it was fun to do these guys.
Hmm. Yeah, really cool. And it's interesting, of course, the correlation of this to the infinity stuff, right? It's like the pushed proportion, the the planarness of it, right? The design of it. I would imagine you were in the midst of all of that while when you did these.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
They were definitely influenced by uh, all the tendencies that we were developing with the Infinity characters.
Yeah, it's a shame Disney didn't have The Walking Dead, right? Could have
That
Walking Dead Disney Infinity figures.
would have been a fun playset to work on.
Yeah, that
Would
would
have
have been
added
fun.
some
Fun
fun
game.
contrast
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
game.
Yeah, have them running around with machetes and swords and all. Yeah, that could have been cool. Some other personal work, right?
Yeah, yeah, just a quick color study and a little caricature
Hmm.
from an old black and white photo.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by seeing this because this shows your traditional skill, that you can get to a place of almost photorealism, really, right? Um, how do you think those two things tie in? Is it important for an artist to be able to accomplish this in order to go and do something like Disney Infinity character paint?
Um, I, I think so. I think studying from life and really helps you understand planes and value and color
Mm-hmm.
really well.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're fleshing out anything that's three-dimensional, I mean, understanding real life
Mm-hmm.
that's in three dimension, I think it definitely helps you conceptualize in 3D and um, yeah, being able to understand planes
Mm-hmm.
and how to simplify them. I mean, you need to know what you're simplifying,
Right.
so you need to understand the starting point, which is realism.
Yeah, you can see to your point, like I keep looking up here at her hair, even in the split, how you've very clearly divided down to the part in her hair versus the surface here and the change in plane, or even on the cheekbones and the nose, right? Everything's planed out very clearly. Let's see, we've got here, right? And then you did some fun Dracula designs.
Yeah, those were from my years at BYU.
So you're already pretty darn skilled in school. I mean, these are really good, really pushed and opinionated, and yet, and they have force, form, and shape in them, right? They've got acting and expression, and yeah, really nice work. And you already had a sense of the clarity of the line. I keep coming back, and I will keep coming back to this idea of just how decisive your line gets, but you can see how you're using these lines to create very definitive shapes.
Yeah, I feel like some of my teachers um, at BYU, they uh, they put a lot of emphasis on line economy, especially Ryan Woodward. Um, he would always encourage us to draw with pen or
Mm,
marker to kind of force us to be more decisive with our line usage, and so we would quickly kind of get over the chicken scratch
mm,
lines
right.
approach to drawing.
Yeah.
And yeah, initially it was really hard
Hmm.
because I had never really drawn much with pen or marker, and yeah, I mean it was kind of humbling. It was humbling.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a lot of very bad drawings,
Yeah.
um, but I just kept pushing through, and then over time I felt more comfortable, and I saw the benefits from that. That yeah, like I was paying more attention to my line usage and line weight and getting those more fluid, forceful lines.
And last but not least, we have a couple of pages here of drawings that you've done. All right, so here's some animal drawings, horses, which I think is probably one of the most difficult things to draw. I
Oh
don't know about you,
yeah.
but yeah, really tough.
Well, yeah, you do an amazing job with horses.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, when it comes to learning how to draw horses, I go to your book.
Oh,
It's,
thanks.
you make it a lot more easy to understand. You break it down, so I feel like there's hope for me.
Yeah, it makes two of us. Like, you know, this is probably the first time I'm saying this publicly, but I always ask my editor every few years, like, hey, I'd love to go back into this book. And ironically, the animal drawing book, the 10th anniversary is next year already. And I'm
Oh
like, can I
wow.
please go back into that book? Because there's like better drawings I want to put in there. And all of the like areas where it's like the profiles of anatomy of the skeletal structure, they're too dark and it's hard to see it. Like the whole book feels a little dark to me the way it was printed, and it's going to be full color now, so I'll be able to go in there with all of the sort of force schematic stuff and make it more clear, So I'm just like dying to get my hands back into that book to try and improve it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, very
I would
excited.
have to get the new copy.
I'll send you a copy. So yeah, these are great, and thank you for bringing that up. I've seen you, you can see that you're using like the force shape in here, and you're keeping the fluidity going while you're drawing all these different animals doing different actions.
Oh, yeah. I again like the way you simplify kind of that basic animal force shape. It really helped me break down quadrupeds to where it felt more manageable in my brain.
Yeah,
Because otherwise, I was just like so overwhelmed. Like if I was just thinking of like the structure of every separate anatomical part and trying to piece it together, it was like, oh, it's too much.
yeah,
But the way you simplified things, it really helped me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that. So now let's get to watch you draw, right? I'm sure this is the moment everyone's been waiting for. So what I'm going to do is hand over. I'm going to stop share and hand it over to you, and then you can pick it up. And yeah, I'm dying myself to watch you actually work. I always get to see all these amazing drawings of yours on your Instagram, and I know you've been launching now your own YouTube channel as well, right?
Yeah, I started it I think several months ago, and just show my process of figure drawing and gesture
Cool.
drawing.
Hmm.
I need to put more stuff on there though. I did a few
Hmm.
warm-ups.
Oh, right. Yeah, awesome.
um, so
So some of these are
hopefully,
Trinda, the model I sent you, right?
uh-huh.
That's cool.
Yeah, they're great poses, very dynamic.
Hmm. Are you a righty or a lefty?
Righty,
Uh-huh.
so I'm not as creative, I guess.
Right. So before
But
you get going here, really quick, obviously this is a question that everybody asks every artist is like, what brush are you using, right? Is this like just a generic, um, Photoshop brush with like a chiseled corner on it, or is it something you bought?
so this is from a brush preset that my friend and coworker Ben Simonson put together.
I see.
And this one's the Paint Flat Bristle
Hmm.
Sharp brush.
Yeah, so it's
Uh,
got a
uh,
slight angle on it.
hmm
Hmm.
I really like it because it kind of has some texture to it
Yeah,
and some variation in the line, and
yeah.
obviously pen pressure sensitivity, so I can go from like thin to thick, light to dark,
Yeah.
which
Yeah, it's
is really nice.
got a lot of character already in the line, and then how you use it, right?
Yeah, I've been using this brush, I think the last 4 or 5 months,
Hmm.
and I really like it.
Hmm.
I kind of go in phases where I like one brush for a few months and then I try something else.
Yeah, that's cool. The other thing I know I've seen on your Instagram, you get asked all the time, which you haven't done here yet, is you'll draw a circle, a triangle, and a square, or you'll turn it into a sphere, a cube and a cone. So we could finally put that to rest, hopefully. Right? Like, why are you doing those shapes and or forms, right? Why those three?
uh, yeah, it's funny. I don't know why I get asked so often, but um, honestly, it's just practicing the fundamental shapes.
Hmm.
It probably harkens back to studying drawing comics the Marvel way.
Hmm.
Um, Stan Lee goes over like um, how everything can be constructed from like a cylinder, a sphere,
Hmm.
um, a cube,
Hmm.
and I guess that's kind of like my little reminder
Hmm.
of that. And it's true. I mean, you break most things down, and those are kind of the fundamental shapes that they're built from. And
Hmm.
um, it's also a good way to kind of warm up and practice your line
Hmm.
before you get going. I
So while you're drawing here, is it easier? Um, and this is, is it easier for you to? Is it okay for you to draw while we're talking, or do you want to do the drawing and then have us watch the drawing?
I guess we could do both
All right, let's see how.
as long as I'm not thinking too much about what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. No, it's challenging. I know. I mean, I did caricatures for many years, so it took me that time to get accustomed to people talking and me having to think and draw at the same time.
Oh
Some
yeah,
Yeah, like some artists need a lot of like focus and quietness.
yeah. I think one thing that helped me a little bit with that was doing sketch groups at BYU.
Hmm.
Um, and we'd be drawing at the cafeteria, and they're of course we're drawing people,
Hmm.
and they would get curious and want to come over and see what we're doing, and
Hmm.
so it kind of forces you to get a little more comfortable with that.
So it seems like you're, as you're working, you're kind of bouncing around between, in my world, force, form, and shape. Is like here's a line of like energy and force. I need to put a shape in here. It could be an ellipse or a circle, but it gives you some sense of like structure. Like on the leg, of course, you looped around the top of the leg there, right? But you started with its direction.
Yeah, yeah. I think like direction and those lines of action
Hmm.
are usually my uh, kind of starting point.
Hmm.
And then there's those basic like anatomical landmarks, like the pit of the neck, the clavicles, kind of those ellipses that show you the perspective of the pelvis
Hmm.
and the rib cage,
Hmm.
and also I'll do that with the eyes.
Hmm.
Just kind of do. It's almost like a wrapping,
Yeah. It's funny that you're
wrapping.
not doing it like on the head. You're kind of drawing these very generic big spaces that the body's living in.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it's just kind of getting that general direction placement down first. Kind of
Hmm.
helps me
Hmm.
then go to the more specific.
Hmm. And your line as you draw, it is that very much like again, like a forced line, like an A to B. Everything is you coming like swinging in and like swooping through it and picking direction, picking direction, picking direction with like every mark. Like you said, there's none of that like kind of crawliness or what I call hairiness, and right?
Yeah, I mean, I try hard not to. Oops. Let's see. Here we are. I just got to shrink this down. I was fortunately not planning out my drawing very well.
Yeah, it's one of I think the hardest things in obviously in digital drawing is even on a Cintiq, it's still really not that big, so you zoom in and then you have to zoom out and zoom in and zoom out and keep trying to track the whole pose while drawing something smaller at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, I do that a lot.
Hmm. You can see how generic you start too. It's like I want to sweep the leg down here, right? So and then you go in and you start chopping in the anatomy.
Yeah, like you said, just getting those directions down first, and especially with standing poses, one thing that helps me is just doing a quick perspective line, connecting the feet on the floor.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big deal.
That
Yeah, it's
if I don't do that, then one of the legs ends up a lot longer, shorter than it should be.
yeah. Yeah, or you lose, like you said, the sense of space, and that could throw the balance off of the figure, right?
Hmm. I should probably do something on this face here.
Nowadays, when you are posting on Instagram, I guess, do you find yourself most of it, what's the majority? Is majority from reference, or is the majority out of your head, or is that sort of equal split?
I feel like I was trying to do a balance between the two, but lately it's probably been more figure drawing,
Hmm.
and that's probably just because I've been like more busy with my work and like freelance stuff. That
Oh, you get to do freelance too? That's cool.
yeah, it's great, but sometimes you get a little burned out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to have full-time job and freelance at the same time, you know.
Yeah, and I guess for me when I'm doing figure drawing, it's more relaxing.
Hmm.
It's a kind of a way to decompress
Hmm.
a little bit.
Hmm. You find the A to B thinking with these forceful types of lines. helps you carve out the form better?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Um, I guess it's kind of like working with clay.
Mhm.
It's like you're placing down that initial mass of clay that you then start cutting away all the smaller details out of,
Mm-hmm.
instead of doing this like little pinch method where you're working into details right off the get-go. And
Yes, thank you for saying that. All those students out there that we're teaching at drawingforce.com, right? Like, I think one of the biggest battles is to fight the human mind, our common mind, to want to look at the shiny red button, instead of, right, like look at the big picture. And I put it in the exact same terms you do of, if it's the figure or if you're drawing the head, um, it's like being thrown a lump of clay. Like, understand the big, it's hierarchy, right? Like, understand the bigger ideas first, and then start chopping this down into medium-sized planes or surfaces or forces, and then finally the smaller stuff, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it really is hard, and it's the same process really. If whether you're doing environments, characters, props,
Hmm.
like it does require discipline because maybe there's a part of your like environment that you're doing that has all the cool detail, and that's like the focal point, and your your knee-jerk reaction is just to focus on that and before establishing like the overall composition and value patterns and everything,
Hmm.
and it always bites you in the butt later on.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say you could even take that idea as far out as even the product or the project itself, right? It's like, what are we after, right? What are we going to try to accomplish here? Like, you could take the Disney Infinity toy line and, figure out what the style is going to be. What is each product going to be? How does it work? How many of these are we going to make? How long does each one take to make, right? Like, what's the emotional intention of this product, right, to the consumer? And understanding all the bigger picture stuff before you're sitting there, all of a sudden 3 months into or 5 months into production, and then like changing a direction, right?
Oops, I just erased something. Oh crap.
But you can see the clarity of, like the eyebrows are really helping build and block out the forehead, for instance, right?
Yeah, when I'm chiseling out the face, I mean, I usually will just do like a sphere to block out the cranium,
Right.
and then I'll add the gesture of the facial shield,
Uh-huh.
and then that quick kind of wrapping tone to show, where the eye placement would be.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, the first planes I'm probably thinking of is kind of the indent of the eyes
Right.
and the eyebrows.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's cool.
And it's always fun to just add little squigglies.
Trim
Add
the
some random energy to it.
crazy hairdo. Yeah, so each one of these drawings, I guess, takes you what, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, right?
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes faster, sometimes it takes a little bit longer.
Mhm.
But one thing I've been realizing lately, um, I mean, I think pushing yourself to do those quick poses is great and very helpful because it helps you to streamline things,
Right.
to start from the simple and then work to the more detailed.
Hmm.
But I think it's also good to do the more uh, the longer duration drawings where you're also allowing yourself to learn the gesture of like the muscles and how they're interlocking into each other, and um, So that's one thing I'm hoping I can do more of as well.
Mhm.
And then yeah, I think it's always nice to draw, um, to not be too afraid to draw through.
Mhm.
I think as long as you're getting the kind of direction, the right direction, then it will feel okay.
Right.
And proportion, that arm is not looking good. Oh dear. Well, anyways, not every drawing is going to turn out great, but
Well, it's interesting to hear you even say that, right? Like that's awesome, and I think that's a great lesson for everyone. Is it's okay if not everyone's as awesome as the last one, or I fubbed on this, or wow, that came out really great, right? It's just we're all human.
yeah,
Cool though. It's cool to watch you work and see how you're moving through the body, and you're balancing force, form, and shape at all times. It's not like you did one full phase first and then another and then another. You're kind of at your skill level, at your point, you're juggling all three and kind of making your way through the body.
yeah, it's kind of nice to just see how everything's interacting with each other as a whole.
Mhm.
Um, because yeah, there's so many times where I wouldn't do that, and then I'd zoom out and be like, "Ah, crap!
Hmm. Yeah.
It really looks deformed," or
Right.
just yeah,
It's
doesn't
cool.
turn out.
So can we maybe do one from imagination and you just draw whatever you want to draw?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Let's see. I can do maybe I could try to do one of Thanos
Cool.
just for fun.
Good old Thanos.
Yeah, he's a he's a family name in every household.
Yeah, that's true. Now he is, that's for sure. So like here you started with a shape with some fluidity and now you're blocking in a little bit of form, right? You gave yourself some roundness in there.
Hmm.
Mhm. Again, very sort of A to B forceful lines, right? Yeah, that's cool. You can see how fast you got with the arms into forceful shape, right? Like it's coming around the tricep side underneath the forearm and then sweeping over. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, when I'm starting off, it's honestly just a lot of troubleshooting,
Yeah.
just kind of playing around with the proportions and
Hmm.
um,
Very shape centric though, right? It's like you're using lines to chop out, shapes that have movement and form, right?
yeah, I mean, getting those again, everything to kind of work together as a whole with the gesture.
Hmm.
So when you start putting the details, you know it's going to be placed in the right spot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool.
I'm just going to center this guy.
You can see how fast you got to this too. I mean, didn't take very long to get a pretty clear sense of his posture and shaping. Was,
Yeah.
was he one of the Infinity toys you got to design?
Yeah, he actually was.
It's cool
That
because it
was kind
seems
of
like you know
fun.
it's yeah. It seems like you know his costuming and what he looks like.
Well, we'll see about that. I start doing his face.
Yep.
Hmm. You just got to get that chin, as
Right.
Star Lord described it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it was an interesting description of it. You have a favorite subject matter to draw? Is it characters and people, or animals, or the environments, or?
Um, I'd probably say people, but I really do enjoy all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think working uh, in the gaming industry as a concept artist, I get to be more of a generalist and
Hmm.
do environment, character, and prop design, um, and it's just fun, kind of tackling all those different visual problems,
Hmm.
and it kind of keeps it exciting and fresh. Doing, I think, everything. But yeah, I would say probably characters. It's drawing people is probably my favorite.
Yeah. Is there, do you find that the skills you have then correlate or move across all of those different um, aspects of your job? You know, meaning props, environments, and characters.
Uh, yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, I think all the design uh, elements and principles are kind of the same across the board. Starting from um, the big strokes to the fine detailed strokes, and finding the shape language, the main shapes, composition, and story.
Hmm. Oh, yes.
I mean, just all those things that you have to think of when designing anything, really.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like before even designing Thanos, it's like, well, who is Thanos, right? Why would how would he stand because of who he is, right?
Yeah,
I think it's an easy thing to forget, you know, especially when people are just starting out. They'll draw characters and poses, but those poses don't necessarily make sense to who the character actually is in the first place.
yeah, and I think that's where reference is very helpful.
Hmm.
Um, Having a sheet of poses and maybe faces and costumes that inspire you, to give you ideas of what you think that character is and personality is. Um, Otherwise, I think all of us have that tendency when we're just drawing out of our head.
Hmm.
We will kind of go back to the same um, kind of design decisions that we have done in the past, which I'm doing right now.
Right.
So, yeah.
Funny.
Mm.
So do you mean like, oh, I've drawn this pose before?
Uh-huh. Right. It's like, this is what I'm comfortable with, so I'm going to do this right now because
Hmm.
people are watching. And
Let me do the double arm cross, right? Quad stance.
hide those hands. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Took a couple of fingers out here. It's funny.
Yeah.
Maybe this, I don't know if I can make this question clear, but when you're drawing, does it go through different types of, in your mind or experience, do you go through different experiences? Meaning, like you have such a to B line, so do you feel like you're chopping the drawing out of the page, or are there times where it feels more like flowing water? Like where's your head at? Do you have a sense of like, my experience is like this metaphor?
Um, oh, just like my experience with my process and how I put
What?
down my line.
Yeah, exactly. What does it feel like when you're putting it down? To me, it looks like you're kind of chopping, right? Because of the clear A to B, it's like chop, 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 chop. Curve, straight, straight, curve, 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 straight, straight. Like A to B, A to B, A to B, A to B, A to B. Some,
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It's like chiseling.
yeah,
Like
hmm,
I think that's why I like this brush is I feel like it does feel more carving.
yeah,
Um, and that's kind of how I feel when I'm drawing is
hmm,
I feel like each line's kind of carving out some of that
hmm, yeah,
clay
yeah,
and
yeah,
revealing the final design.
yeah. Again, maybe that is some of your tactility with the pottery, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Who would have ever thought that the pottery guy would be drawing um, Disney bad guys, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny just thinking back on when I was at BYU in the studio arts program at the
Mhm,
B66 building where they do all the sculpture. And I mean, the culture there is so different. It's the fine arts,
mhm,
and everything's very, very subjective,
mhm.
extremely subjective.
Right.
And that's probably one of the reasons why I became slightly disenchanted with it,
Mhm,
um, because I felt like I was paying all this money for tuition, and um, we'd have these group critiques, and they just didn't really seem to go anywhere. It was just like, oh, I don't like it,
right.
or I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I think I like it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was hard to get a why,
Yeah.
and like really knowing the breakdown of the design and why it visually pulls you in,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
yeah,
There's no skill in this conversation, and it becomes totally subjective. Like you said, it really doesn't go anywhere, right?
yeah, that was frustrating for me.
Yeah, that's hard. I taught in Poland a couple of years ago, and all the artists that came to the workshops were saying to me that was their frustration with the country and the art programs in general, is they would have great facilities, but they were so open-ended and not, they weren't skill-based. It was very subjective, which is cool, but it's not like they taught you anything. So you're kind of on your own, but they'd say, here are the supplies, and here's the kilns and everything else you need to work. Here's whatever metal and soldering, whatever you needed was there. But nobody was really like teaching the how-to part of it, and why, to your point, right? Like what is good and what is bad. And it's like, I feel like you should at least have that at the beginning and go through it before you can get to, okay, let me start finding myself, right?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think one artist that I uh, that makes me think of is Pablo Picasso,
Right.
because he was actually like very well versed and trained in the traditional arts, and
Yeah.
like he knew composition, he knew anatomy, he knew color,
Hmm.
and when he had that foundation, he started breaking those rules and
Yeah.
um, finding his own unique style, and
Yeah.
he knew why he was breaking those rules.
Yeah. And that, I just went to that museum in Barcelona, and one of the main like Picasso museums, and that happened very late. That was either as like late 40s or early 50s that the Pablo Picasso that we all know more famously occurred. Years of training prior to that was, like you said, was very was realism. It was very traditional drawing and painting background. And his dad was an artist, so he was learning as a kid as well.
Um, it's funny how we don't get all those details.
Yeah. I mean, they
It's
were so good that I even question it. Like they had pieces there of his that they say were done when he was like 14. And I was like, no way. He did this when he was 14. Like paintings
wow.
that were just, that were college level, let's say, work when he was in his like young teens, you know, and then they had pieces of his when he was 19 that looked like probably a 30-year-old would have done them, you know. I mean, they were
Wow.
yeah, huge oil paintings. I remember this one piece was 3 or 4 figures in a room. I think it was like a doctor and somebody was sick in bed, and the painting was probably about, I would say, 8 to 10 feet high by 10 to 12 feet wide, and it was a, you know, just a huge full scale oil painting of numerous figures in a room that takes a ton of skill. And he did it when he was like 19 or 20 years old, you know.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, I know where I was at 19 or 20. I could, yeah, I could never have touched that, you know. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I wonder if that's just because they had those apprenticeships. They usually knew what they were going to do very early on and
Yeah,
focused all their time and energy on that. And
yeah.
I think we can get distracted with lots of choices and
Playing video games.
yes, playing video games.
Having fun playing games. Yeah, which I'm totally guilty of myself as well. So cool, right? Got our Thanos. You got him almost fully costumed out. Someone throwing in some tone.
Yeah, giving him some clothes so
Yeah.
he's not naked. He could be a dark seed too.
Yeah.
He's really just your kind of typical large framed bad guy.
Mhm. So in closing here, do you have any closing thoughts, any advice for artists starting out? Uh, any things that I guess have stood out for you in your path to now working in the field and getting to the skill level you're at? Anything that you would be able to share?
Um, I think one of the most important things is just to draw a ton.
Hmm.
Like, I think realizing that the professionals out there, a lot of those guys are drawing like 10 plus hours a day.
Hmm.
and and if you're just drawing, 2 to 3 hours a day and that's it,
Hmm.
it's going to be really hard to compete with those guys.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's a good point. It's almost like take advantage of the fact if you're not working in the field and you don't have a job, you should be using all that time to draw more than the professionals are drawing, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and of course not being afraid to make mistakes.
Hmm.
I wish, and I still suffer from this today. I wish I just didn't care so much about protecting my ego when
Right.
I'm creating a design, or just drawing out of my head. Even it's like just myself criticizing and scrutinizing myself is enough to sometimes make me fearful to try out designs or things that I haven't done in the past that I'm not comfortable with.
Right.
I say the quicker you can get rid of that fear and just go for it and just have fun with whatever you're drawing, um, mixed with lots of studies from the masters and books like yours and artists that you want to emulate.
Hmm.
But on top of that, just drawing a lot out of your head and not because I feel like I've seen so many artists in the last 10 years that I've kind of been in the industry that started out doing these kind of um, lackluster designs and sketches. They were kind of crazy and they were pretty bold in uh, the subject matter and the poses or the armor, the ideas they were trying to do.
Hmm.
And initially I'm like, oh well, they got a long ways to go.
Hmm.
But a lot of those guys that just didn't have the fear and they just drew what they wanted, like eventually they just became unstoppable.
Yeah.
And then they had all this creativity behind their designs, and it seemed like, yeah, the sky was the limit.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of times we kind of impose barriers on ourselves
Yeah.
and say like, oh, I can only draw this, I can only draw that, or I only want to do that because I know that's what I do well, and I'm
Right.
afraid to have someone see a bad drawing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, I agree with you 150%. Sometimes when I'm mentoring, I have students saying, wow, I didn't realize this was going to be, you know, so much of a psychotherapy session as much as drawing sessions, because I really try to dig into who people are when I'm teaching them. Because, like you said, one of the biggest hurdles is getting over yourself, right? And God, if everyone in the planet just had the freedom from fear, like what would we be capable of, you know? And I think art is a place where we really get a sense of that, you know, like just having the freedom and the courage to explode and be the best version of yourself, if for any other sake, for the sake of curiosity and learning, right? And that alone would drive you to improve, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, for sure.
Cool.
I feel like with like I know I'm an introvert.
Hmm.
I'm definitely an introvert,
Hmm.
and I think that's why like I one of the reasons why I enjoy being creative and drawing is I can kind of be in my own little world, and I probably feel safer there,
Hmm.
and I love being in that place. But I feel like as an artist, like you do feel safe there until you have to show your work and, have other people uh, judge your work and what you're doing, and then suddenly you don't feel like you're in that safe place anymore.
Right.
So yeah, if we can just get over that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for saying that. I agree. It's a great way of closing today. Is everyone out there, you know, work with some confidence and courage, right? And you're going to learn by making mistakes. We all make mistakes. Josh makes mistakes. I make mistakes every day, right? And that's okay, right? That's how we get better. All right. Well, thank you, Josh, so much for your time today and sharing your past with us, and also drawing, you know, and showing us how you work. And yeah, and everyone go check out Josh's Instagram account. Now you have a YouTube channel, and that all that information will be below for you guys to just click on some links. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your future work, Josh, and seeing where you go with as much courage as possible.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
Okay, you too.